Okay, great. Good afternoon. Good to be here. We'll just kick off, shall we, with some brief introductions, then we'll get into what I believe is the final talk of the afternoon. So first of all, I'm Mark Hammond. I'm the Managing Director of Net Zero Group based here in Manchester. We help companies measure, reduce and offset their carbon emissions. I mean, you heard from Victor. Do you want to go ahead?
There's nothing more to say. But yeah, thank you very much for having me here, and hopefully I can provide some other insight as well.
Okay.
I'm Nathan. I'm the one of the co-founders and the CEO of Vector Homes, which is a scale-up based in Manchester, trying to drive efficiency improvements in the construction value chain.
I'm Niamh. I have introduced myself, but we're a smart buildings company locally with a core focus on utility monitoring, air quality, which is a sort of big passion of mine in terms of the indoor environment as well as sort of the outdoor environment, and a lot in terms of occupancy space utilisation of our buildings. So we do everything from sensors right through to installation, dashboarding, insights.
Great, thank you very much, Niamh. So with regards to the kind of the headline of the session, Sustainable Horizons, Pioneers of the Future, in the spirit of kind of the future starts here and now, we thought we'd just kind of kick off by asking the audience to give us a sense of, from a business perspective, the companies that you work for. Quick show of hands, who has started their sustainability journey, please? Okay, so great. So that's probably just over half. Okay, interesting. Okay, that's great stuff. From a personal perspective, so outside of work, can I ask who knows their personal carbon footprint? Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, so the majority of people do not know their carbon footprint, and I guess that kind of plays through a theme of awareness, education, and how can we do things like today, and conversations around just general awareness, both in our day-to-day lives as citizens, as well as employees and business people. So, okay, great, very interesting. So, just to kick off, then, can we talk about from a Manchester perspective, and maybe Victor, you can maybe just pick up from where you just left off there, please, in terms of what specific green sector advancements are we seeing here in Manchester, and in particular, kind of if the people that didn't put the hand up there that have not yet started, how do we get started? So we know where the future is, but actually, how do we all get moving?
Yeah, so Manchester, we're in a great city. No question that we're in a great city, that there is all of the support networks. The local authority is very on board. We only have to fight with central government where they're not quite so sure what they really want to be doing in terms of direction. And as we've already outlined, there's quite a bit of strategic work out there that gives some great big ticket items that people might want to be trying to plug into. But in terms of what that really means in terms of boots on the ground, then that's where we see the action planning and the strategic work is in process. There's a great activity that central government has funded called the Local Area Energy Plans, and Greater Manchester was one of the early adopters on that, along with the energy catapult, so that there are now detailed plans and detailed positions of what the energy opportunities are across power, heat, transport, and so forth that we can all plug into. In terms of where there are little pockets of other local opportunities and so on, for instance, we did some work with Trafford Council and looked again at the 1,300 businesses that are across there, and they have obviously different levels of buy-in, just like everyone in the room. But the opportunities again then really do come from those early steps, taking that engagement to look at the energy saving, to look at getting the biggest hits can be in terms of getting employee buy-in and employee engagement. It's quite shocking in some of the studies that we've done, the almost counter behaviors that still some people have out there. Okay, we can't always have massive green advocates like we have here in the room, but if you've got people who, for whatever organizational reason, aren't happy in what they're doing, then that's going to translate into what it will mean both on the bottom line, but also from your sustainability side of things. Coming from the technology provider, obviously, what I would be saying, and it's great as well on the panel, we've got people who do IoT and understand that digital, and really understanding those figures is what gives the place. But we mustn't forget as well that with that digital infrastructure comes the capability and the opportunity for control. We talk about energy metering, we talk about the smart meter revolution and how that might start controlling our washing machines, our electric vehicle charging and so on, where it's a lot more perhaps people are concerned around the privacy side of things. It's not to say we're not concerned about privacy in our business lives, but there is the potential to work with those resources, the commercial and the industrial resources, in that compliant way, and in a way that it's an investment that provides a return, greater understanding and flexibility of what you're doing with your processes, and so forth. And so really, for me, that first step is know thyself.
Okay, good, thank you. So going on from there then, Nathan, as a clean tech business, just kind of what are your thoughts and what are you seeing, and what do you need to progress, I guess?
Yeah, so I think just following on from Victor said, I think I very much agree that on a local level, there's definitely support sort of drives sort of sustainability and the green agenda forwards, and also and echo the thoughts on the sort of national side of things. The merry-go-round of Whitehall isn't fantastic and sort of driving things forward, but I think there's a good chance we may see a change there in the relatively near term. But I think in general, I think Manchester's, from what I've seen, has got a phenomenal sort of startup ecosystem in this, with and a huge amount of support for the green sort of economy, both on the digital side but also on the sort of hardware side of things. And I think a key thing moving forward is I think you sort of alluded to, I think the digital side of things really gives you an idea of where the shortfalls are and what can be improved. But I think hardware will be a vital sort of vital piece in the puzzle to actually start driving that change through once the sort of the learning has come through. So I think a key thing moving forward would be creating that sort of bridge between the digital, well, the software and hardware type of stuff. And we're as a company trying to do quite a bit of that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, is there a gulf between, almost, if there's a proportion in the room here, probably 40% have not started their sustainability journey. I guess when we talk about policy and Whitehall and these big, big topic terms, the reality, if we're sitting in the audience today and have not started, what can we do? Because again, we're talking about the future, but it's action versus what can we do to start moving? And from our perspective, we see actually companies we spoke to 2, 3, 4 years ago, and they'll kind of contact us and say, that thing you spoke about, a carbon footprint 2 or 3 years ago, we need it next week because the tender process or the commercial pressure. So that's really progressive. We're starting to see the kind of almost the commercial pressures now and the supply chain pressures cascade down from corporates that's driving that requirement and need to actually go out and learn, ask the questions. But I mean, is that something, Niamh, you've seen in your world, the digital piece and
I'm nodded because it happens to us now almost on a daily basis, where we've engaged with somebody 4, 5, 6 years ago, and then they're coming back and saying, actually, sustainability is now on my agenda. Actually, I do think you can help me. And I was talking to you just outside before about, we worked with a client in the creative arts sector, so historical buildings. They can't do a lot with them in terms of knocking things down or what measures they can put into those buildings, and they were being asked by being told by M&E consultants, put in an air source heat pump, do this, get a solar. And actually we came in as our company, gave them some very much free advice and helped them to actually, for that type of building, an energy efficient gas boiler was going to save them £3,500 per year and was more suited to that site. And the way they were able to do that was from monitoring. So initial baseline data, where do you start? What is your, the ground zero? So there's loads of measures. We're helping a client now look at infrared heating. There's air source, there's ground source. There's so many different things you can do. Like take that client. They were doing, they put solar on the roof. Nobody advised them to look at a battery and how they could potentially start, taking some of that energy and selling it back or using it for other purposes. So I feel there's a big push to do something now, and sustainability is here and now, and you've got to do something. But why not just sort of take a step back, get your baseline data, and that can be your utility data that you might already be collecting, your air quality data, it can be occupancy. Even yesterday I was on a panel and they were talking about, I've got a big challenge because all of my workforce want to be at home, and now I've got to worry about heating them and their safety at home, but then I've got an empty building. So initially, I would say start with the baseline, and then it can move forward. And where you say, sorry, I did want to add about the community that's in Manchester, Made Smarter hasn't really been mentioned, but it's a part of the growth company, and we sit on the digital advisory board for Made Smarter. So if you're an industrial manufacturer or you're looking at sustainability measures, there is funding in Manchester. Somebody will come and do a walk around of your site, and then they'll help you look at sustainability. I just feel there's lots. The growth company is very multifaceted, so it can help you with training, it can help you with funding, it can help you with your sustainability. And I'm not an advocate for them, I just think they do a great job. So I just feel there's lots of resources you can tap into to help you start that.
And maybe if I can build on that point as well, our CEO, Carl Innes, likes to talk about we should drink our own champagne or eat our own dog food. But in fact, many of you who are from Manchester will know the Siemens building on the way in from the south of Manchester. Yeah. So we've started our decarbonisation journey on that. What we've managed to do with some investments was already save 600 tonnes of CO2, and that through that baselining saves on the utility bill around about £115,000 a year at the outset, and that included putting in sort of some smart technologies from Siemens that were around LED lighting, that sort of thing. 3 of those technologies had a payback of under 2 years and saved 25% of contributed to that 25% of that £115,000. So the numbers are there. And it is, if you know yourself, if you've got the tools like these organizations have to help you find and discover what you can do before you start investing and generating energy. Every watt or watt hour that you can save and not consume is one less that you then need to try and find to generate from a green source later. So put solar on, put wind, clever technologies or whatever else, but make sure you've got to your baseline first, and then you only need to have far less offset to cover the energy that you still need to run and operate efficiently.
Yeah, great. I think I'm repeating the obvious in terms of that baseline. What gets measured gets done. So about the solar piece, I know a little plug for Luke here in the audience you've already heard from at PSE. We did some work with Luke and been to some of our client sites and looking at what the current consumption is based off their baseline, but then actually then looking not only what is the current consumption of the business, but what's the future, what's the forecasted energy and electricity consumption, because in the case we went to a construction client and it's actually very low use. They've got a couple of laptops, a kettle and a microwave, and everything else is fossil fuel based. Big dumper trucks and forklift trucks and cars are all petrol, diesel. But actually in 2, 3, 4 years time, that's all going to transition to electric cars, electric fleets. So then trying to future proof what that looks like.
But where do you focus your attention? So like we've got a large theatre group that is in the UK and globally, and they have a challenge that yes, they've got a capital budget per site because they're a private theatre company, they've got budget, but they're looking at energy efficient handrails, they're looking at solar, they're looking at voltage optimization, they're looking at new ways of heating. They don't have that great data in terms of their theatre. So when they're trying to benchmark which energy efficient measure had the best return on investment, because they had the baseline, they've then done that in one of their sites. And now they've got a list of 1 to 5 of where they're going to target and a sort of a roadmap and a strategy for the rest of those sites for the next 5, 10, 15 years. It doesn't matter to me how long it takes you to get there, as long as you've started here and you're sort of on that road to sustainability. And for me, data does give you a lot of that.
Yeah, I think just to add from my perspective and sort of prefacing this, I'm not like a green militant activist, sort of super gluing myself to the M6 or something, but you know, from my perspective, most companies, you know, ultimately the bottom line is the bottom line, and I think, you know, having these case studies and these examples that Victor was saying about the actual savings to the bottom line is important. But you know, most companies aren't cash rich, and although they may have a payback time of 2 years or 1 year or 5 years, I think, you know, a lot of companies don't have that capital outlay or capital to outlay. So I think, you know, that's where central government then starts to come in again, and whether or not there can be grants or specialist borrowing facilities to enable that sort of thing as well is going to play a key part moving forward. And I think there's a lot of stuff being done on green mortgages and things like that, but I think, you know, green business transformation grants, I think, is something that could pave the way for the smaller sort of SMEs and micro entities and spread that to the masses and enable us to do a little for a lot rather than a lot for a little.
Yeah. I think just the engagement, awareness, taking as many people on the journey as possible. I think Victor mentioned like that education amongst employees. You know, it can have a really positive impact in terms of training, carbon awareness, in terms of overall reduction. We talk about using kind of carbon calculator or training with team members that it essentially amplifies the message. It takes the sustainability strategy outside of a sustainability manager, if they indeed they have one. It might be HR, it could be the MD, but it essentially amplifies it across the entire organization. Then fundamentally, there's a cost piece, right? And I think where it is, and your point, Nathan's absolutely right. I was told year one, just as we kind of went into COVID, that Mark, respectfully, I need to save my business before I save the planet. And it's kind of prospecting call. I'm respectful of that. But where can we position these conversations that actually are around, you know, commercial savings that are aligned to sustainability? And it's where it sits, kind of cart before the horse. And again, increasingly, we're seeing this kind of cascade of large corporates demanding a footprint and a sustainability plan from their customer base. And it's all well and good for the larger companies in the room, but actually, you know, if you're a smaller company supplying a big company or a big corporate, you know, perhaps with sandwiches outside there, and you ask your carbon footprint for the local cafe, that's a real challenge for that local cafe. But so how can we collectively, there's lots of resources out there, clearly, but it's trying to work through which ones are appropriate for which company and when. So just touching on kind of collaboration, there's clearly the fact that we're all here. I mean, are we seeing, Nathan, you touched on, I guess, what you're doing, trying to take your business and outsourcing the kind of manufacturing, but it will come in-house, hopefully. Are you seeing an ability here in Manchester to collaborate? How do you kind of make the most of what's available?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as I was sort of alluding to before, there's an amazing sort of startup ecosystem, a science and technology ecosystem in Manchester. And Vector in itself is incredibly collaborative in nature. I think we've won about 7 Innovate UK grants over the last year and a half to develop a range of different sort of built environment sustainable technologies.
Wow.
And as part of each and every one of those, we set up a consortium of companies to be part of that. And with, you know, the idea is that those members of those consortia have already got the facilities and the capital equipment to scale. So, and we've never had any issue in terms of attracting partners to be part of these sort of research and development projects. But as well as that, you know, as I said, there's an amazing infrastructure here. You know, you've got the Graphene Centre, Graphene Engineering Innovation Centre, a stone's throw away. You've got the Sustainable Materials Innovation Hub in the Royce Institute. You know, 100 meters away, you've got Energy House 2, 200, you know, a mile away, you know, you've got an amazing sort of infrastructure, I think, honestly, world leading. And it really does foster that sort of collaborative community. I do think there is a bit of a disconnect between the software and the hardware type of stuff. There are sort of individual sort of software centers that I don't see that much link between. I think, you know, it's pivotal that does happen. Because, you know, everything's now got some element of software and hardware in it. So I think that is a key thing to drive future collaboration forward as well. But overall, I think it's an absolutely amazing environment.
7 Innovation UK grants.
Yeah,
Wow. Wow.
we've done quite well.
Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So if anyone wants to collaborate, if anyone's doing that, then it's an okay. Just before we kind of move on to the kind of the collaboration piece, in terms of challenges, again, people in the room have not started or maybe just started, or indeed actually the opposite, you're a really advanced kind of part of your strategy. You know, what do we see as challenges? Is there anything, maybe coming back to you, Victor, in terms of, again, people haven't started, what are the challenges to getting started? Again, knowing where you want to be. And I might say really briefly, we had a discussion recently with a big sporting organization, and about a number of them, and they've got some really ambitious plans, like really, again, using data to talk about facial recognition, to see staff coming onto the stadium, ANPR cameras at the ground to get kind of season ticket holders to come through. Some really great progressive developments, and using tech. You know, we even used, you know, AI ourselves kind of to just create clean data up. But actually, some of that advancement actually is hampering getting started. So it's, yeah, where are we going? But how do we get started?
Yeah, well, I think it is a fundamental problem. There is just so many great ideas, great opportunities, great products, great services out there. That bringing those together, you know, we've taken our approach as Siemens, and that has its own challenges. The funding, you'll be pleased to know, isn't easier just because we're a big corporate. In fact, it tends to work against, because it's assumed that you really should be starting to fund or drive your own innovation, which we do, but not everyone does that. And therefore, it's a matter of having the time to develop those partnerships and those understandings, which is difficult. There is funding out there. There's a lot of investment funding that can be found, but yeah, I think it really does boil back to what we've been saying around the resources and sources here in Manchester. You've got to tap into those to get those people to help you find the path of what it is that you need. So that's certainly what I would look to encourage.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think funding's always going to be a key issue. I think, you know, if you look at, you know, being part of a sort, you know, starting a company now, you know, especially I talk mainly towards hardware, because software you can normally get an MVP not on the cheap, but you don't need so much to get to a sort of a working software sort of thing. But when you're talking about sort of real hardware development, it's normally pretty capital intensive. And although there is funding available, you know, if you look at the sort of the funds that are around Manchester and the UK in general, you know, the ticket sizes relative to the States are pretty small. You know, there's in the States there's funds with ticket sizes that's each ticket's the size of what we consider a large fund in Manchester. And also, you know, and then on the other side of things, you know, Innovate UK grants, they're very competitive, but the other key thing is that, you know, it's all paid in arrears. So you've got to be able to fund those grants, and you have to be pretty efficient when it comes to capital allocation and ensuring you get your R&D tax rebates and all this sort of stuff as a startup. And it's a relatively complex environment, and you need a fantastic team to be able to sort of do that. So I think in general, I think the UK is relatively risk averse market. I think when you look at the fact that base rate has increased as it has over the last sort of 2-3 years, you know, VC funds are promising, say, 12% return capitalized over 10 years. You know, they're looking at 3x, but you can get 6-7 and pretty low risk, you know, 6-7% yields in relatively low risk markets at the moment. So that only drives more difficulty into the sort of the VC landscape. I think that's also reflecting in the amount of new funds coming online, etc. And a lot of new funds these days are actually tapping into government and central government funding as well. So, you know, I think there's definitely a lot to be done on the funding landscape to really drive innovation.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just my thoughts on it.
Okay, good. I mean, we'll just before we're going to touch on again, and the final point around kind of, you know, what is that horizon? I used the kind of the buzzword AI a minute ago, so we'll just ask kind of questions about what you are seeing or feelings out there in terms of, you know, the North Star is kind of a client of ours kind of reference their kind of carbon and sustainability ventures. But before we kind of go to that final point and conscious of time, are there any burning questions for the panelists at all in terms of, again, those of you who haven't started or indeed have started in terms of, or indeed the funding or the resources that are available in terms of where you want to be, you know, guided or kind of any advice? No, good, got it. Okay, well, if anything crops up,
Can I ask a question of the audience in
Okay.
that case? A slight curveball, but I'd like to just understand how many people have got smart meters in their own home? So there are still quite a lot of people. And so I want to pick up on a point that you made, that we're risk averse. One of the least risky aspects, there's no investment required, is the smart meter in the home. And the problem is that this risk averse, this is one of the barriers, this risk averse sort of approach that we're seeing from central government all the way down is hampering innovation. I sit very much in the energy sphere, and one of the things that's going to unlock everything after the energy efficiency piece and so on is that drive towards whether it is going to be nuclear, whether it's going to be more and more renewables, onshore and offshore wind. But the whole risk averse thing is really hampering the market, the regulatory environment, and how it then drives through to us. So, you know, zero investment needed to get a smart meter. You might lose a day at work if you've got to let the guy in that sort of thing. But, you know, we've got to take that lead and drive that from where we stand as well and push back on that risk averse nature.
There is just on that, there's a TED talk. Most people might have seen it because it did come out years ago, and it's about they use neighbours to say to get you to can't but get the words out now. They sent letters to all the neighbours basically saying your neighbour is saving more energy than you, and on the street they basically saw that everybody started to look at energy measures and they wanted to know how their neighbour was saving more energy, and they were using the psychology of people to start on that sustainability journey. And the podcast is just, it's amazing. It's just an aside, but it picks up on that point that if you think someone else is doing it, and that's the problem with innovation, is that you're always waiting for that person to give you a case study and to tell you how to do it, but you've got to get started on your own journey. And through monitoring you can start to pick out those inefficiencies quite quickly. But the home example is a great one, but watch it.
That reminds me of, unfortunately, I'd love it to be a case study. It is, but because my memory's so poor, it's more of an anecdote. And this again applies more in your corporate environment, is to take exactly what's got there. If you've got the sufficient size that you've got groups or teams of people, have a departmental energy spend, carbon footprint, that sort of thing, and put it up. And even if you don't incentivize it and say, look, you know, if you say 10% by the end of the year, we'll give you whatever it is, just that fact is that psychological fact of, oh, just a minute, they're better than us on this. And human nature plays a part in there. So that could be another great step.
There was, I came on this panel thinking I wasn't going to have anything to say, so I'm sorry for talking so much. We've got an aerospace potential client, and they've built a sustainability group inside the business, and they've not just gone for somebody that's maybe got an ESG or sustainability background. They've gone to every single department and basically formulated a group that are driving the initiatives forward. So that's also something that you can do that is relatively, you know, cost effective if you get a group together and get them to think about how they could reduce energy within the business and sort of within the supply chain and things, but having those different perspectives. I think it was like called a transformation change or something, but it was an amazing group, a great idea in terms of how you can get those messages back to management on how you can make savings as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, it was actually quite interesting. A month or so ago, we went to visit a site of Saint-Gobain, and one of the things that I thought was really impressive about what they did is they've got like clocks around the office for sort of counting down to sort of 2030. So when people are walking around, they know, you know, it's a good way of sort of integrating it into the sort of company ethos. Is you know, you've got the, you know, it's everywhere. You walk down the corridors, you see this sort of this countdown clock, and I think, you know, those types of things, that's on the psychological side of things, is really interesting as well.
I was conscious, I've got a quick question, please.
So we are sensor nerds, right? And when I came into the building today, I brought my sensor to look at my air quality. Delighted to see that it's 28 degrees. Delighted to see that your CO2 levels are fantastic. 634 parts per million. Does everybody know about CO2? Hands up if you know what a good level is, a bad level.
About 800.
Right, well, educate yourselves, right? Because I could tell you, anything above 1,000, you're cognitively impaired. You won't be able to listen to the audience. Second question. Some of the worst spaces I see are in schools. We're professional people. We put ourselves in lovely accommodation. Thank you very much. Yet my children and my grandchildren are in some of the worst spaces, and I see figures of 5,000, which means they're not only cognitively impaired, they're getting headaches and they can't possibly pass an exam. Can Siemens help put pressure on government to give these schools some funding to be able to sort out ventilation? Because it really is a problem.
Yep. Well, we have a lot of STEM outreach, a lot of apprentices. We recruit a lot and bring all of that sort of stuff through. So I'll speak to that team that through our corporate people, we'll have a chat around that side of things as well. Thanks for raising that point.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Right, last couple of minutes. Just finally on kind of North Star, is anything we're seeing, and maybe examples here in Manchester of kind of North Star reporting or sustainability?
I'll just quickly add. So we've got where we've engaged a lot with sort of manufacturers and the industrial community, we're starting to see them adding sensors into their products to create new lines of revenue. So here locally in Manchester, we've just installed some sensors on behalf of our client that's going into kitchens. So stainless steel kitchens up and down the country, and they want to add sensors in to offer a new line of revenue to their customers. Last week, we went to see another client. They're interested in putting sensors into pipe works and things like that to give, so you don't have to send engineers out to site, and they can offer again a new line of revenue. So for me, it's initially use the data for your baseline and to start benchmarking these interventions. But then actually, how can you use that data to derive value and create a new line of revenue for you as a company? Because the value is going to be in data, ChatGPT, AI is all coming. How can manufacturers and maybe the construction sector and industries that maybe aren't using as much data, how can they use that moving forward?
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, final comment?
No, it's like we're developing some interesting sort of sensor solutions in that space as well. So one of the things we're developing is printed electronic heat flux sensors, which it's funded by Innovate UK, but the idea is that you're essentially using conductive inks to print using standard screen printing techniques to create thermopile arrays that can be used to sense thermal transition through different surfaces and things like that. And obviously we're developing it for the built environment for houses, so that it's one of those things where for a house, the vast majority of people, the house is the biggest ticket item they'll ever buy, but your car's got sensors all over them, but as part in your house, you may have a thermostat, you may have a motion detector, you may have an alarm, but there's not much else. So and there's a lot of value to be derived from that data in terms of predictive maintenance and fixing things before you lose too much energy, etc. So that's a sort of a key thing that we're sort of addressing on the sort of the Vector Labs side of the business.
Okay, good, great stuff, great stuff. I think we're out of time, but I think it's very clear as we move towards future horizons. There's lots of examples here. There's lots of developments. There's clearly lots of support, funding, ideas, and hopefully collaboration. I think testament to that you've all given up your time today. I'm sure your phones are buzzing and there's emails to be returned this evening. Means that we're all kind of working towards a common goal. So thank you to the panel, Niamh, Nathan, and Victor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark. Mark Hammond from Net Zero UK there, and a brilliant final panel. So I'm going to wrap us up. I thought we'd finish with a bit of politics, because it hasn't been a very political day. I thought a little bit of lobbying for government for you to take